Uh,
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Heated Shenanigans Podcast. I am your host, Scott, and without any further ado, guys, let's get into it. As you can see, joining me today, WWE Hall of Famer, the Million Dollar Man, Ted DiBiase. How's it going, Ted?
I feel like $1 million. I had to kind of race to get here. I'm almost 70 and I have four grandchildren, and one of them had a T-ball game today, and it was very close. But actually, I had to leave my wife there with the other set of grandparents and shoot back home so I wouldn't be late for this. So here I am.
I really appreciate you taking time to do this and missing a family function like this. It means a great deal to me, Ted.
Well, my pleasure.
Well, let's get started here. Something when I was doing some research to get started for this episode that I'd come across and I wanted to get your verification on was when you first got the Million Dollar Man moniker in WWE. There was a report that Vince McMahon was giving you some extra money to help live the gimmick of the Million Dollar Man and keep kayfabe up with that. Is there any truth to that?
Well, it's like this. When when we first started it, anyway, he said, look, he says you're going to be flying first class, and he said, um, and for a while, everywhere you go, there'll be a limousine car service, airport to hotel, hotel to Coliseum, back to hotel, back to airport. He says, I want the people to really believe you're this guy as much as we can. And he said, and he says that means I don't want you staying at the Holiday Inn. He says I want you to staying at the Hilton, the Hyatt, and the Marriotts. And he says, don't worry, you'll be making enough money. That's one thing they didn't pay for were hotels. And so, but I had the limousine service. I had the limousine service for a good while. Eventually he cut that back to having. He says, instead of the limousine service, he says, just when you rent a car, like rent big cars, rent Cadillacs and stuff like that. And of course Virgil was there. That Virgil's only job was to seriously be my valet, carry my bags, open doors, and all that stuff. And you saw on TV, he never had anything to say, but hey, it was a good gig for him because he was making pretty good money too.
Man, you can't beat that, especially when the boss is helping you live the life and
Yeah,
contribute.
he. I remember that first day. This one of his secretaries came in and they counted out $2,000 in brand new $100 bills, and he said, "This is your flash cash." He says, "Wherever you go, whatever you do," he says, "if you buy a pack of chewing gum, pay for it with a $100 bill. They hate you. You're getting a pack of gum, and they got to make change for a $100 bill." and he said, I want you as much as possible, obviously, to live it, so wherever people see you publicly, and part of that was those things. And it was just crazy. I couldn't believe it. It was kind of like um, and Ben said, he says, we're hoping that you'll be one of the hottest heels we've ever had. And I said, yeah, I hope so too. He says, and I said, but I might be one of the hottest heels in the dressing room too. And that didn't pan out. He said, I don't think that'll happen. And all the guys were pretty like, what, if I had gotten this gig, who wouldn't take it? So yeah, it was great.
I mean, I definitely, I think that's an incredible story. And speaking of stories, one thing I wanted to make sure we got in on this podcast today is over the course of your career, Ted, from all the wealth of wrestling that you've been able to be a part of, what would you say is the best story you have seen told in a professional wrestling ring? Not necessarily a match, but the psychology of what's going on in the ring.
The best what now?
the best story you've seen told in a wrestling ring?
Oh gosh, man, that's hard. You know, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of big names, and I would say prior to WWF, you know, my involvement with like the Funk family, Terry Funk and Dory Funk Jr. That family of wrestlers was always very close to me. Their father and my father have what many people believe is the longest professional wrestling match on record, 3 hours and 15 minutes. A Texas death match that happened in the summer of 1966. But, you know, storyline wise, you know, like, for me, you know, I can't even remember. I mean, obviously, I didn't ever have the world championship. You know, I never had it at the NWA. Of course, my name was in the hat. I was one of 3 names at one point. Dusty Rhodes, you know, was one of the other names, and I'm trying to think. Me, Dusty, and Flair, and you know, and so Dusty and Flair both ended up being world champions in the NWA, and of course I went on to the WWF, and I actually never, well, I paid Andre, right? That was the deal. My closest to actually being the champion was paying Andre. People ask me that. They go, does it bother you that you were never legitimately the world champion? I said, it doesn't bother me. I said, because wrestling is it's not real. I mean, we're all playing roles. I said, the thing that was most important to me was, as a heel, I wanted to garnish the most heat that I could. And so what they did, and it was a great idea. I mean, it was Pat Patterson's idea. He said, "See, what if we have the tournament, Ted, and you walk away with the belt, you know, because you help Andre cheat to win. He gives you the belt, but then we strip you of the belt because you didn't win it really. And in your arrogance, you basically thumb your nose at the world title and say, I'm going to create my own title." And as soon as he said that, I said, do it. I said, because that will put a ton of heat on me. Kind of like, who does this guy think he is, right? You know, just declares himself, you know, the $1 million champion, and takes on all comers. So that was the deal, was the heat. And yeah, you know, if I could have had a run with the world title, because in the NWA anyway, if you're going to be the champion, whoever's carrying that belt has to have the ability to work with everybody he gets in the ring with. In other words, you know, if he gets in the ring with a lot of people who aren't to his caliber, he's got to be the guy calling the shots and knowing how to make that other person look good. And you know, and that's part of being the champion. And I had those skills. And yeah, it would have been nice, but you know, bottom line is, it was, hey, the $1 million man would say, it's all about the money, honey.
Let's say, over the course of your career, though, Ted, like, you had such a lasting mark and impression on professional wrestling that oftentimes when your name comes up in conversation, it's the top heel work that you gave to professional wrestling, how much you were hated and how good you were at your job. And the fact that you never won the actual title, I don't think has any bearing on your legacy. You've had one heck of a run.
No, you know, it has no bearing on that. That's just it. It's your you know, as a heel, you're seeking the heat, and the more heat that you can have on you, you know, with whomever that is you're working. And of course, you know, I had my little run with Hogan, but it was really more like me and Andre against Hogan and any one of a number of characters. It wasn't like I really had a single run with him. And you know, Randy Savage came out of WrestleMania 4, my first WrestleMania, as the world champion, and I had a little run with him. And of course, uh, and you know, I was told that there were I don't know that some of the decisions they made were to try to keep everybody happy, you know, and maybe keep Randy Savage happy. But you know, when Pat Patterson told me the idea about the $1 million belt, I said that's where it's at. And so, you know, I was one of the top guys for as long as I was there.
Say over the course of your career, what would you say is one lesson that you learned in professional wrestling that you didn't expect to learn, and how did it change your career afterwards?
Hmm. Wow. Uh, I don't know that it's a lesson that I learned as I was a wrestler. It was more a lesson that I learned before I ever became a wrestler. As a son of a professional wrestler who went with his dad and and had conversations in cars and stuff, and would talk to people about the wrestling industry. It's kind of like um, it's because a lot of guys can be real selfish, and of course it's a wrestling is a dog eat dog profession. I mean, it's kind of like anything else, like there's a lot of potential Hollywood stars out there, and some of them make it, and some of them that are really good don't, and a lot of that is timing, but I think a lot of that is knowing what the right timing is knowing, and the one thing I never did was disrespect anybody that I wrestled with, even guys that were in the ring totally for the purpose of making me look good. What we call the jobbers. They're just, it's an enhancement match. But I would even most heels would just totally decimate those guys. I always would give them just a little, just a little, but that just a little was just enough to just really, like piss me off, and then I just explode and go on and win. But giving them just a little, I mean, it's kind of like if you just totally dominate, who'd you beat? You know what I'm saying? But if you give somebody, if you make somebody look good, then when you beat him, then you've beat somebody. And that was always my, that was always the way I looked at it. And of course, I've always thought that my type of heel is the best type of heel if you're going to stay a heel. And it's in the lingo, we call it the chicken shit heel. The guy who talks real big, and then he shows the fans that he can wrestle, but whenever he gets in the jam, he cowers. Or he starts backpedaling. You never get tired of seeing that guy get his butt kicked. And that was the kind of heel I was. Now, if you're a tough guy heel, okay, like let's look at a couple. Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was a tough guy heel. Well, guess what? People like tough guys. And there was no helping it, but Steve was going to become a babyface just because he was a tough guy, and people respect a tough guy. Even though he was a heel and he was working with the other, baby faces, eventually, if you're a tough guy, then it's inevitable that you're going to end up being a baby face, but not with a chicken shit heel. You can you'll be a heel as long as the day is, and like another guy like that was Jake the Snake. That's another type of. He talked good. He showed the people that he could wrestle. That he was really a good wrestler. But it's that you never get tired. It's kind of like I could be beaten into the ground, and they would still want to see somebody else beat me up because of of the arrogance and the attitude, and then actually showing the people that I could wrestle, that I had talent. I don't know. It's a psychology of wrestling.
And it's an impeccable explanation as well, especially on the view of the squash match. It's a lost art, really, because now, like, you don't really see them too often, and your explanation of letting them get a little bit in to make it mean something,
Yeah,
lost art
yeah.
in this day and age.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, I'll be honest, and it's hard for me to watch wrestling today because a lot of times I just find myself getting angry. And I'll be honest with you, it's not really the talent's fault, because the way that I learned my trade was by doing it, by getting into the ring every night, and the other guy in the ring is a seasoned professional. He's there to lead me, to show me the way, and it's getting in that ring night after night after night, and wrestling in front of a live crowd, and then you begin to hear the crowd, and you begin to, play off of the crowd, and that is key to wrestling. And unless you've had that opportunity, it's very hard in the way the business is today to do that. It's kind of like some of my favorite matches. I mean, one of my favorite matches with Jake. Jake and I both come from the same school of psychology, and we had, I think it was WrestleMania. I think it was 6 in Canada. I'm not sure, but we had a WrestleMania match, and because we come from that same school, and of course, by that time Jake was a baby face, and but with the snake, but the psychology of the match that we had, it was just it's that whole idea. It's just like every time you go to a movie, when you walk in the movie, it's not real. But if the actors in that movie can present to you as believable as possible the story that's being told, you get into it. You're sitting on the edge of the seat. They can make you laugh. They can make you cry. They can make you mad. Well, that's wrestling. That's wrestling too. It's like if you're that real, strong heel, and again, the cutthroat, stab you in the back type heel, people will never get tired of somebody kicking your butt. And I have fans come up to me all the time now, and they go, "Gee, Mr. DiBiase, you don't be offended, but I hated your guts." And I just laugh, and I go, "Thank you. That means I did my job well." So there you go.
One thing I had definitely had a few people ask me when they found out that you were going to be on the podcast with us was when JBL got the change in his gimmick to what was very, very similar to what you were doing. Did he reach out at all to you for any advice on how to perfect the $1 Million Man character?
No, because and you know what, and JBL, and I tell everybody that, I said JBL was the cowboy version of the $1 Million Man, and he did it very well. And again, he was that same type of heel. He got it. He and I, we had a few conversations, and I said, "Brother, you do it well," because I can still remember JBL in those matches. He gets in the ring, and he takes off, and he's this big stud, and pretty soon he's on his knees in the corner going, "No, no, 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 no," and then takes the cheap shot, and bang. Again, the classic chicken shit heel, and he did it very well, very well.
With wrestling, it's all about making that emotional attachment to what you're seeing. If they can make you believe that you can relate to what's going on, then you're in. Then you've been connected to what's going on in the ring.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Um, say one other question before we start to wrap everything up here. Um, Throughout the course of your career, Ted, was there ever one opponent that you really wish that you would have got the chance to work with because their style or maybe their character or gimmick would have really meshed well with the Million Dollar Man?
Well, the one guy that I wish I had had the opportunity to work a program with, I mean, like not just a match, is Ricky Steamboat. My respect for Ricky Steamboat, I consider Ricky, one of the goats of professional wrestling. And we only had one match, and that one match was so good, and I just remember thinking, oh gosh, if I could do this, if we could do this every night, what we could give the people would be unbelievable. And so he's probably one of those guys who I just never had the opportunity to get to run with him.
And that's a shame because that Ricky's ability to sell and to make you care about the condition that he's going through throughout the match, on top of your incredible character work and wrestling ability, we
Yeah,
missed out as fans.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I mean, because he could sell, buddy, and that's what it's all about. It's all about selling, and that's even as a heel, it's all about the selling and the comeback. And when it's time for the comeback, for the heel to give the baby face the comeback that he deserves. And again, Ricky, he was just like he was one of the best.
100%. Well, before we go and wrap everything up here, Ted, is there anything that you have that you'd like to promote? Any upcoming appearances or social media you'd like to let the fans in on?
Gosh, well, let me give you guys a rundown of where I'm going to be. This weekend, I'm going to Tampa, Florida.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a whole lot of wrestling buddies in Tampa, Florida, man. I know Beefcake's down there, and the Hulkster's down there, and there's a whole bunch of them down there. But anyway, it's the Florida Extravaganza, kind of a Comic Con. It's a two day event down there. Saturday, April 22nd, and Sunday, April the 23rd. Um, the following, oh gosh, well, the following weekend you can't go with me because I'm going all the way to Manchester, England. uh, then May, the Bluegrass Comic Con in Ashland, Kentucky, the first weekend in May, and the next weekend, Wrestling at the Chase, St. Louis. St. Louis wrestling is it's in a league all by itself. So many of the wrestlers that became big stars in the territories in the WWF all passed through St. Louis. Some of the greatest. It was like St. Louis was technically it was part of the Kansas City territory, but it was in an entity all of its own. It's like if you went to St. Louis and you got over, people were going to hear about you, and so that's one that I'm really looking forward to. And then May the 20th, I'm doing a deal in a little place called Ringgold, Georgia. It's I think it's near Chattanooga, Tennessee. But anyway, that's the month of May, and I could go on. I got them all over the place. So I still love to. People always ask me. They say, "Do you ever wish that you could get back in the ring one more time?" And I said, "Not really." I said, I had my run. Now, like I'm almost 70 years old, and for a guy that's almost 70 years old, I'm pretty good shape. No major health issues, and but when I really get the urge is if I see a young guy and I'm watching a young guy having a match and I see the potential. I see that, I can watch a guy and tell, I call it the it factor. You can't teach charisma to anybody. You either have it or you don't. And you could go out and you could do a perfect wrestling match. technically, step by step by step by step. But if you have no personality, if you have no charisma, it's just like one of the guys that I had a great run with in Mid-South Wrestling, Junkyard Dog, JYD. Oh, I mean, he had so much charisma. His interviews were classic, and he really wasn't that gifted in the ring. But as a pro, you learn to work around them, and what you do is you highlight what they do best. And he was one of those guys that I really enjoyed wrestling to, only because number one, he was one of my best friends. He was the best man at my wedding, but he could talk, man. What else did he said? He said, DiBiase, he said, you can't come like a cabbage, all head, no rear. You got to bring some to get some. I just laughed at that. He was great. Anyway, I could go on and on, man.
Let's say, well, we're going to wrap this up here. I want to thank you again so much for your time, Ted. It's a true honor to have you on the podcast with us. I know the fans have been wanting to see you on for a while, and I'm glad that we could make this happen for them.
Well, it was my pleasure, and maybe we could do it again one day.
Oh, absolutely.
As I go, I just have to remind everybody of something that's very important. Everybody's got a price for the $1 Million Man.
All right, well, that's a perfect way to end it, guys. We will see you next week with Heated Shenanigans Podcast. And everybody out there, have a safe and happy week.